I'm Michelle, and we're going to talk about how I and you can use mindfulness, compassion, and connection to find your inner calm and a little more sanity in your parenting. Hi, I'm Michelle, and I help parents who want to parent peacefully and calmly to foster strong relationships with their children and at times find it really hard. When my kids were small, I found myself so overwhelmed and burnt out. Not only did I struggle with responding peacefully or playfully, I got caught in an awful yelling pattern, followed by overwhelming shame because yelling was the last thing that I wanted to do. Now, let's talk about how I and you can use the science of mindfulness and self compassion to find your inner calm and a little more sanity in your parenting. Today's topic, your body on stress. Why yelling happens before we realize it. So, um, I'm going to just tell a quick story. I found myself getting short and feeling edgy and just on the border of yelling. And then I thought to myself, oh, maybe I'm carrying some stress here. Um, honestly, this happens regularly, right? It's like life is happening. So my stress levels go up and down. And unfortunately, I often realize my stress levels are up because I am getting kind of like, why aren't you doing this with the kids in the morning? Let's say, couldn't you put your plate away? Why aren't you put your plate away yet? I'm kind of more short and edgy and just tense. And then they kind of like, oh, they give me this reaction like, I am putting my plate away. I did do this. They're reasonably responding with frustration to my edginess. And this is now, after years of practice, a cue. Oh, something's happening inside of me. So I want to help you notice more about what's happening inside of you. So stressors are what activate the stress response in our body. This is the neurological and physiological shift that happens in your body. It is there to help us. It's an adapted, evolution response to, um, it's like the fight or flight response, right? It's there to fight the lion or outrun the lion. But what if there's no lion to run away from or fight off, right? We have traffic, we have work projects, we have kids that are struggling in school, we have, conflict with our partner, all these things that are triggering our stress response, but we're not actually running away from any of them physically, like running, and we're not fighting anyone off, hopefully. So that stress response that gets triggered in our body stays there and it gets stuck and we aren't completing the cycle. And Emily Nagoski and Amelia Nagoski, they're twins, and they wrote a book called Burnout, The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle, explain this in great detail. Just because we have dealt with the stressor, such as the project at work, what's ever happening with the kids, the conflict with our partner, whatever it is, doesn't mean we've dealt with the stress in our body. And oftentimes we're not completing the stress response cycle. And there's lots of reasons, right? Sometimes it's because we are in a chronically stressful situation. And even if we are running or moving our body regularly, the stress that we're taking in outpaces our capacity to process it. So sometimes, even when we do have some healthy habits like moving our body regularly, we still can be experiencing intense stress inside of our body. So, what does this have to do with parenting? Well, inside the Yelling to Connecting course, I help parents map out the stress that we experience so that you can learn to one, like know your stress response, understand the impact, and so that you can expand your ability to manage stress. And if we don't know this, and we're just thinking about the other person in the interaction. So let's say we have a difficult interaction with our kiddo and we are just focused on what they did, how they responded to us, right? Like that example I was giving of in the morning, and I'm like, why didn't you put your plate in the sink? I always ask you to put your plate in the sink, but you can't just put it on the counter. You also need to throw the food away in the trash, right? And I'm like, guess what? My daughter is probably going to be annoyed and frustrated that she's being yelled at out of nowhere. I'm using that term yelling kind of loosely here, right? But on the receiving end, she probably feels like she's being yelled at, even though I might not literally be raising my voice. And then she might say, I am, or okay. And then if I'm not noticing what's happening with me, I might scold her for being disrespectful or not talking to me in a nice way or not just following directions without, any kind of negative feedback. And that would be sort of short-sighted, right? Because and then if I scold her, she's going to get more upset. She might shut down. She might move away and be upset and move away from me. She might kind of like talk back and be more upset and say, why are you you're always so difficult. Why are you talking to me like this? And so she might kind of get more reactive, or she might just kind of like shut down and move away. And neither are great. And they might stir up more of a negative reaction inside of me. It's not okay for you to talk to me that way. I'm just asking you to put your plate in the sink. That's always what's expected. Or you can't walk away from me when I'm talking to you, those kind of things. And you can hear how quickly something can escalate, right? And so it's really important that we notice how this whole spiral is getting started, because otherwise we might either one, it might spiral out of control, or we might draw some incorrect conclusions about what's happening, right? We might be just focused on our kids' behavior and we might be stuck in blame about them and what they're doing. Or we might blame ourselves and we might think, well, there must be something wrong with me because I can't handle life. I'm not patient. I'm not kind. I'm not being flexible with my kids, I'm getting too upset about things, and then we blame ourselves. Either one is harmful, right? If I'm blaming my kids, if I'm blaming myself, neither one are harmful, or both are harmful, and neither one are helping change what's happening, right? So what could we do different? First off, I would love for you to check out the book, Burnout. It's really good. And I don't have any affiliate. I've not met Emily Nagoski or Amelia Nagoski. I just love their work. And it's a great book. So one, check it out. If you want to listen to a YouTube video or a podcast about it first, but it's a really great listen on Audible. They both, I think, take turns reading it. And so that's one thing you could do. The second thing you could do is begin completing the stress response cycle, right? So now that cue of, I think this happened this morning. Yeah, that I was kind of like, can you put your plate on the counter? Like you left it on the table. Don't just set it on the counter. You also need to throw the food away. Oh, look at that. That's interesting. I'm being really kind of rigid about this whole plate thing. Yes, it's annoying, but why is my reaction so big? That's interesting, right? So that's a cue. Maybe there's stress in my body that I haven't moved through the cycle. The most efficient way that they describe in the book of completing the stress response cycle is moving our body. So this is where we get our heart rate up and we move our body in some kind of way, in some kind of physical exercise. And even I love that they talk about this in the book, but if you start a routine, it takes 30 days to offload all the stress that's been stored up for a long time. But eventually you get to a point where you kind of like notice that you start feeling better after you move your body. Another option, which I love that they give this in the book because for many different reasons, maybe physically we might not be able to move our body. Maybe we might not be able to find the time. There's lots of obstacles, right? If we have little kids, a baby at home, like there's lots of obstacles. Another thing that you can do is tighten all your muscles and then release with a big sigh. This is another way of completing the stress response cycle. Sleep helps us to complete the stress response cycle. In the book, they give lots of ways to complete the stress response cycle. Because, like I said earlier, we might deal with the stressor, the work project or the conflict with our partner or whatever, but the stress might still be stuck in our body. So these are ways that we can complete the stress response cycle. And also in the pause and regroup that I hope that you've heard me talk about, it's a guided audio that you can get on my website or in the show notes. And it's AKA Rage Break. I walk you through ways of completing the stress response cycle, right? That's when I help, when I give you ideas for moving your body in a way that helps offload that like tense anger, like feeling in your body. That's the stress response. That is an example of completing the stress response cycle. And I wouldn't necessarily say it would be complete, but you're starting to move through it and offload some of that energy in your body. So, in summary, you are not broken, and it's definitely not that you're not enough. If you find yourself struggling or having a reaction that's a 10 when the situation warrants like a 1 to a 3, there are good reasons that you are struggling in those moments. And while your child may have room for improvement, it's likely that whatever's happening isn't solely their fault either. And it can be really empowering to look at our side of the street because it's actually, hopefully, usually easier to start making changes within ourselves than getting our children to like make changes. And when we start with ourselves, then we can approach our kids in a way that they're more likely to be receptive to. So it is very empowering to start with ourselves. And you might say to yourself, well, I should be able to fix this on my own. The thing is, we are mammals and we are wired for connection. And getting support for anything that you're struggling with is a strength. And when we are in a group, we can learn that we're not alone in how we suffer. We can learn that we're not the only ones that have similar struggles. I mean, that is often what I hear from the parents in the group is, I thought I was the only one, or it's such a relief to hear that other parents struggle with this too. And that helps with the shame and that we often carry as parents. So I personally am no longer going to face life alone. Whatever it is, if it's work, I'm going to get support with work. If it's kids, I'm going to get parenting support. If it's, I've done couples therapy with my husband. Like, I'm not going to try to do this alone. And I hope that you will consider the same for yourself. There's lots of different kinds of support that we can get. And you might consider what could you do that gives you support? Even listening to podcasts like this, that can be a way that we're getting support. And also, hopefully, we can you can have some kind of one-to-one interaction with other parents as well. And a quick win: every time you move your body, give yourself props. Remind yourself, like, oh, this is me completing the stress response cycle. When you're doing the dishes, you're standing up. That's moving your body. It might not be very fun when you take a walk, when you're playing outside with your kids, when you get a good night's rest. Yay! You're completing the stress response cycle. You're helping the stress move through. This week's play idea: freeze dance. So basically, you take turns. Well, kind of being the one in control of pausing the music. I would let your kiddo be the one to pause the music if they're old enough, which they could be pretty young and be old enough, right? So you listen to a music and then they hit pause and you freeze in whatever crazy, silly position you're in. Kids love to be in charge, right? Because they're always being told what to do and how to do it and always being instructed. And they don't get to be in charge very often. So it can be a fun thing for them to get in charge of the pause button. And then it can be really fun to see what silly ways that you pause while you're dancing and enjoy laughing and whatever silliness comes about from this freeze dance. I would love to hear how it goes. Maybe you can shoot a picture of you guys freeze dancing and send it to me. I would love to see that. And as always, share your play ideas and I'll share them with the community and we can all help each other come up with more creative ways to play. And bonus, that is completing the stress response cycle, right? Because you're moving your body. Hey, before you go, I have a free gift for you, the guided audio pause and regroup that I mentioned earlier, aka the rage break. And like I said, I walk you through moving your body in a way that is helpful and not harmful to anyone. And I walk you through shifting your thoughts and regrouping so you can rejoin your kids and show up the way that you want to. And a reminder, this content is intended for educational purposes only and should not be a substitute or a replacement for psychotherapy services. Compassionate Heart Mindful Life does not provide psychotherapy services in any capacity. I am a therapist, but I'm not your therapist, and this is not therapy and should not be a substitute for mental health treatment. If you need mental health treatment, please find a qualified professional in your area. Thanks again so much for listening. The light in me sees the light in you. Be well.